that can produce points and score himself.
Yeah,
that's the first thing you need.
The Wild really love Christian Dvorak for the Arizona Coyotes. They came close to acquiring him last summer for a Zucker Niederreiter deal. And I'm being told by really good Arizona sources that the Wild have no chance of pulling that off, but they would be willing to use Zucker in a package for Christian Fischer, who I'm sure who's coming off a weird year. Wasn't very good, but he's got a lot of upside. But again, I don't know him well enough. But a big, right shot forward and young and kind of foots the bill. But that's the other weird thing. It's like everything I hear, like they're talking to Calgary about Sam Bennett. It just seems like the value that they're using for Zucker, it's like nothing's equal. It's like they're going for William Nylander in Toronto, Phil Kessel here, Christian Fischer here, Sam Bennett here, Michael Frolik here, Brock Besser. It's like they're just the value. Like it's just, and that's why it just seems like sometimes he's kind of, shooting from the hip with everything he's doing. So it's a weird situation right now.
From Ben Streeter, we remember Ben. How great a risk is it that Kaprizov doesn't come over next year if the team ends next year at the bottom of the division or the league?
Well, I mean, I always go back to I've got to think that he wants to play in the National Hockey League, and if he wants to play in the National Hockey League, the Wild own his rights, so he's got to come over. The thing is, that he's got to understand is he's cost himself a ton of money. By not signing his entry, just say he signed his entry deal 2 years ago, and he was coming off that 2-year deal now, and he became the player that we all think he could have been these first 2 years in the NHL, what would be his second contract in a league where second contracts are absolutely monster? By him just signing that $1 million deal there each year, the amount of money that he has cost himself here is unbelievable that he will never get back. And now when he comes over here, he's got to sign that same contract. He's got to come over at the entry max, which, unless he's going to achieve his A bonuses, he's cost himself some cash.
There's no doubt about it. And the fact that they don't realize that it's not what you're costing yourself in the first year. Mm-hmm. It's what you're costing yourself at the maximum year. Yeah. Because it takes you longer to get to the maximum year. And I don't know how that ever happened, that this guy never realized that he should be playing in the National League, because I don't care what you tell me. Everybody in the KHL that's any good wants to play in the National Hockey League, and they want to make more money in that. And it's something that's eventually going to happen. He's going to play in the National League. So the sooner he gets here, the better it's going to be for him.
I do think that there are pressures that Kaprizov was dealing with that I don't think any of us can relate to. It's a different world over there. He's a different type of player. The team he played for was different. He went to the World Championships 2 years ago. All of a sudden, this is Kirill Kaprizov, who had just led Team Russia with 9 goals in the World Juniors to lead the tournament a year before he leads them to a gold medal, and he's on Team Russia for the World Championships, doesn't play a single shift. What were they doing? They were holding him hostage. I just think there are pressures over there that we just don't understand on this behind the scenes stuff, because we're relating it to a free country, free Americans, that we could do whatever we want, where I don't think any of us, I remember, a perfect example is Valerie Bure. Pavel Bure has gone back and forth to Russia, but after Val Bure defected here when he was a teenager, I don't think to this day he's been back to Russia, because he's so scared that he'd never be able to leave again.
Well, I had the same thing with Musso when I got him to defect. He couldn't go back, and his father lost his job and the whole thing. But finally, when the curtain came down, and now he goes back, he scouts for Edmonton out of there. But for years, he couldn't go back, and his wife was his girlfriend. Then she was a top 10 tennis player in the world, so they'd meet here. But he knew, and it took a couple of years to get him to do that. But they knew what was going to happen when you're going to leave. You got to sacrifice some stuff, and even the family knows it might affect them, which it did. But this day and age, it's a little different. Even though they're holding him hostage, if he was getting good guidance, and really, he should have been in more contact with Wild and people from there, telling him, even though you might suffer this for the year, you might not play in the World Championships or whatever, you can come the year after. As long as you don't sign something, you're free to come. Because what they have now is different from Val Bure. They have a deal with the National League. They didn't have those deals before. The curtain for us finally came down in '87, and that's when you could deal with the Czechs and the Russians and stuff like that we didn't do before. So they have the benefit of being able to have something in place which allows these players to leave.
Brian Murray used to always tell me the story about him in the woods with the trunk of a car open, like trying to get like guys like Konstantinov and Fedorov out there. Do you have any similar scary stories where you're in the middle of the woods and freaking Russia?
Well, it wasn't the woods, but when I got the word that he was Musil had gone from Czechoslovakia to Umag, Yugoslavia, and this was in July, and he was in Umag, and I said, I'll be there tomorrow. So I got in the plane. Fortunately for me, my door was open. Bob Bruce was a broadcaster for Channel 5. And he hears that, and I come out and I said to Sue, get me a flight tomorrow morning right to Yuma, to Trieste, because that's the Italian border. Yugoslavia was still communist at the time. So Bob Bruce says, I'm coming, I heard you. I said, you got to stay out of my way. I'll stay out of your way, I'm coming. So he came with a cameraman. Now, the three of us flew there. We get to Trieste. He was supposed to be in Umag, but he was going to Zagreb, which is the capital, and that's where we have a consulate. So I'm in Trieste, so I rent a car, a tourist car, and I drive it to Umag that night. Bruce and the cameraman came with me. I wanted to take a drive just to analyze, do I put them in the trunk? How do I get them out? Because you can't get them out. I got no visa. So I get to the Yugoslav border and on my way back, and they come out with the machine guns and everything else, the guards. I jump out and try to give them a pin, see if I could soften them up with his. And then, no. They just check the car and back in. So I'm looking at them checking the car. I'm thinking, well, how am I going to get by here? Well, they got the gate up, but then 50 yards past is the Italian gate. The guy's sleeping in the booth. He doesn't care, whatever. So I figure I'm putting Musil in the trunk. I'm going to slow down as I come in. I'm going to just gun right through the deal. And that's it. So I'm all set the next day. I go there. I get to the consulate where I'm supposed to meet Musil. And he was there with Rich Winter.
Rich Winter, yeah.
And so I'm supposed to meet him at the consulate. I get there, and you go to the door, and they got bulletproof glass, the Marines behind it. And I said, I'm Lou Nanne from the Minnesota North Stars. I'm here to meet František Musil. He's a Czech hockey player that's going to defect. I'm taking him here. And they said, well, we don't know anything about it. I said, he came here. I talked to him yesterday. I talked to Winter. František's not great in English, but he was pretty good. We don't know anything about it. I says, you better find out who's in charge here. So he calls upstairs to the head of the consulate. And the guy says, no, they were here, and I sent him over to Belgrade. Well, in those days, they had what's called a reclamation place. And if you go there, then once you admit it, you have to stay 2 years. You can't get out. And I'm going nuts. Are you kidding me? He's on his way to Belgrade. I said, I got to talk to you. He said, no, I have no time. I said, well, then you better come down here for a minute. We want to talk to you in cameras. What are you talking about? I said, I've got a cameraman here from ABC, and we want to put you on the air to say you won't have help an American in a communist country. Wait a minute, I'll settle down. I'll be right down. So he came down, and then I told him, I said, you can't allow that guy to, register in Belgrade. He said, okay, I'll get right in the phone. So what do you want to do? I says, I'm going to take him out tomorrow. He says, how? I said, well, I took a drive. I'm going to go through the gate and just go. He said, you nuts? You can't do that. He said, they'll be shooting at you and everything. Well, how else am I going to get him out? And he said, do you know any senators? I said, yeah. He said, well, you got to get a senator to get you this paper and have a contract signed. I said, give me your phone. Picked up the phone. I called Dernberger. He happened to be in his office in Washington. I said, Dave, you got to do me a favor. You got to do it. Listen to this guy. He'll tell you what to do. So the guy told him. And I hung up. I called my assistant, Sue Thomas, at the time, and I said, you got to take a contract with, here's the terms, take it down to the immigration office in St. Paul. Got those two things faxed back to the next hour. And the funniest part was, so now I take these guys, I take him, I said, whoever you want in the staff. So he takes a couple other guys. So 6 of us are having dinner in the restaurant, have about 6 bottles of wine. I get a tap on the shoulder from the guy, maitre d', all dressed up. And he's looking at me tapping. I says, cheesecake for everybody. And I keep talking. He taps me. I says, don't you understand? Cheesecake. We want cheesecake. And he keeps looking at me and tapping me. The consul says, Louis, that's a KGB. and he says, hold on a second. So he pulls out the diplomatic passport in green. He said, with us, all of us. So the guy went away. So the next morning, now I got Musil arrives. Now I got to get him a visa. I go to get him a visa, and the guy says, can't do a visa till 4 o'clock. And the consular guy says, I got you on a plane at 1 o'clock. So it's 10 o'clock. I slip him some money. I said, okay, here. Now can I have a visa? Yeah, 10 minutes. So I got the visa. Now I got that Taurus car, right? So I go over to Hertz, and I said, do you take cars here? Yeah, drop off, yeah. So I give him the keys. Send me the bill. So he walks out, no, Italian car, can't take it. I said, here's the keys. I don't care if I own it. Because I was going to pay $250,000 to a guy to get him out. So Taurus at that time, maybe $8,000. I don't care. Yeah. So somebody owns a car. I'm out of there. That's all I know. So I gave him the keys. I got a bill a month later for $467 for the Taurus. So
really?
I didn't have to own it. That was good. And then I had him on the plane out of there. Now we land in London. Now the immigration people won't let him off the plane. And they said, no, he hasn't got a visa. I said, no, he's defecting. So he hasn't got a visa. We're not letting him off the plane. Tell you what, we'll take him in a holding area. You go up and get 2 seats on the next plane out of town. Went upstairs, and the Concorde was leaving in an hour and a half. So he and I got on the Concorde, and we flew back. We landed. FBI or some of the secrets or whatever met us at the plane. We didn't go through customs or anything. Wheeled us off from Kennedy to LaGuardia, and they flew us home.
Amazing.
Wow. I mean, this is my stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how much I've read about the Cold War and the aftermath of World War II itself. That's a novel right there.
You mentioned Rich Winter, the agent. It reminds me of the first time. It was like I was 21 years old. He was the first hockey agent. I had dealt with guys like Drew Rosenhaus covering the Dolphins. But Rich Winter was one of the first hockey agents I dealt with, and he had Esa Tikkanen. He had Robert Svale and a bunch of guys on the Panthers. But he had Esa Tikkanen. Tikkanen was on the Rangers. And that whole summer, Rich Winter is essentially leaking to me that, hey, Panthers, we're going to go. He wants to play in Florida. You got to get him on Florida. And so I'm basically I'm all excited. I'm getting all this for the first time. I'm a young kid, and an agent's just feeding me info, and he's just using me, and I'm writing it. And finally, I get a call one day from Brimer. He goes, Mike, can you do me a favor? He goes, we are going to sign Esa Tikkanen, but every time you put his name, you cost me an extra $100,000. So that's how I got the story. Sources say the Panthers are going to sign Esa Tikkanen at one point, and they signed him $1.8 million at that time on a 1-year deal. And that guy talk about I remember Brian basically he said to him, he goes, I wanted to give you this a contract to retire, but not while you were playing for us. So he was that bad for the Panthers. That guy was a beauty to cover. Yeah, I'm covering Esa. I'm covering Esa one day. And we're in the locker room in Pompano Beach at Gold Coast Ice Arena, which was their practice facility. And we're interviewing Scott Mellanby, and Mellanby whispers when you talk to him. He's kind of like Shaquille O'Neal that way. You cannot hear him. And so the music is on loud. And there's the 3 beat writers in the locker room, Scott Mellanby and Esa Tikkanen I think he was getting bag skated. And I go over to the sound system in the locker room. I turn off the music, and as I'm walking back, all of a sudden I hear this screaming and yelling in like a language I don't hear, and it's him screaming at me for turning down his sound system. He's like, "This is my radio," and I'm like, "I don't think so." But I ran to get the PR guy. And I'm like, "Can you get this guy out of here?" I can't remember why we had to talk to Mellanby. I think it was they made him full-time captain for the first time, and we had to interview him, and Tikkanen's just going nuts. And I'm like, I even said to Tikkanen once when he was screaming at me, I'm like, Esa, I got you on this team, dude. Chill out here. We're buddies. So, the funny thing about the Ford Taurus thing that also popped in the head story. So when I was interviewing at the Star Tribune, which you know well, I was in Europe. And I was on the Sun Sentinel's dime in Europe on my BlackBerry. And the reason why is because the lockout ended and free agency. So I had this trip to Europe planned forever. And we never knew when the lockout was going to end. So the lockout ended in early to mid-July, and free agency started mid to late July, just oddity. And I'm in Europe, so I said to the Sun Sentinel, I'm like, hey, I'll just cover free agency from there. And they signed Nieuwendyk and Gary Roberts and everything. But as I land in Paris to connect to London, I get the phone call from the Star Tribune that I want to interview there. So the whole trip in Europe, I'm basically interviewing for the job. I'm doing my due diligence about what it's like to live in Minnesota and all that stuff, asking advice, all this stuff. So about 2 months after I moved here, after I took the job, I get this bill in the mail. and it's like AT&T. It's forwarded. AT&T